In this video, I wanted to talk about using arpeggios from the chord scale to generate some different ideas within the modes, and hopefully to start to build a little bit of a sense of tension and release within your soloing. This is mostly going to apply to single chord vamps or modal vamps that consist of just 2 or 3 or 4 different chords that repeat fairly quickly and that don't really require you to follow the chords all that closely when you're soloing over it. There are some different ways to think about this kind of thing, but really the easiest way to think about it is to think in terms of the chord scale that belongs to any given major scale. Now, if you go through the music theory clinics on my website, you'll find some lessons that talk in depth about chord scales. I'm going to gloss over it a little bit right now here, but if you don't understand it fully, I highly recommend that you go check out those lessons too. To make a long story short, a chord scale is simply all of the basic chords that can be built from the 7 notes of a major scale. So if I take a G major scale, that's going to be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then back to G. And if I build a chord from each one of those steps, it's going to give me a G chord, an A minor, a B minor, a C, a D, an E minor, an F sharp diminished, and back to G again. If I want to take each of those chords and build a 4-note chord out of them, those were all just triads, but if I want to build a 4-note chord, a 7th chord, out of each of those steps of the scale, I'd get a G major 7, A minor 7, B minor 7, C major 7, D 7, E minor 7, F sharp minor 7, flat 5, otherwise known as F sharp half diminished. Those are the 7th chords that can be built from the G major scale. All of those chords are simply different ways of arranging the 7 notes that exist within the G major scale. I should also add real quick about that minor 7 flat 5 chord, F sharp minor 7 flat 5. You know, that's not a chord you're going to run into too often outside of the world of jazz, basically. And so don't worry about that fact that maybe you don't know what that chord is or what to do with it. There's still, even in this context, a couple of uses of it that are really pretty easy to understand and actually sound pretty cool, and I'll be getting to those in this video. Okay, so now let's start taking a look at how you can apply this when you're improvising within the modes. I'm going to take the mode of A Dorian as my example. This is the mode of some pretty famous modal jams, including Whip and Post and In Memory of Elizabeth Reed by the Allman Brothers, Oye Como Va by Santana, Sand by Fish. There's lots, and in fact the play-along I'm going to use is based on Slipknot by the Grateful Dead. Now, the mode of A Dorian is derived from the G major scale. Again, if you don't totally understand that, I recommend you check out the lessons on the modes on my website. I'm going to gloss over it a bit now. And check those out when you have a chance, or for now just trust me on the fact that A Dorian is based on the G major scale and contains the exact same 7 notes as the G major scale. And therefore, all of the chords in the G major chord scale can then be applied to A Dorian as well. Another way to think about it is really that those chords from the chord scale just represent some different ways that you can arrange the notes of that mode that'll give you some different sounds. So if I'm going to play over this A Dorian vamp, and I'm going to play in the Dorian mode, I can use arpeggios based on that chord scale. And when I do this, I like to keep it real simple. I just play a real simple arpeggio. I'll show you what I mean. So I'll start up this backing track here. Straight A minor, but over that I can play a G major 7. I can play A minor 7. I can play B minor 7, C major 7, D 7, E minor 7, I can play F sharp minor 7 flat 5. So I should point out that if A minor is home, then all of these other arpeggios from this chord scale represent being away from home to some extent or another. And so being away from home builds tension, and then you resolve that tension by returning back to the home chord of A minor. So you build an arpeggio from one of the other steps of the scale, and then resolve the tension by coming back to just a simple, straightforward idea in A minor. So let me show you what I mean. My first go-to choices for arpeggios tend to be the neighboring ones within the chord scale. So if my home is A minor for A Dorian, I go down a step to the G and play the arpeggio off of that, which would be the G major 7. Or I go up a step to the B and I play the arpeggio off of that, which would be the B minor 7. And again, I resolve the tension that's created by doing that by finishing off those ideas by returning home to A minor. Let me give it a try a couple times and I'll show you what I mean. So here I am in A minor. I can drop down and play a G major 7 arpeggio and then return back to that A minor like this. Or I can go up to B minor and play an arpeggio, followed up by returning back to A minor. And by the way, this is where that F sharp minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio could come in handy. Again, if you remember, that was the 7th chord of the G major chord scale. So if I apply that to A Dorian, F sharp minor 7 flat 5 is going to sound like this. Okay, and then we have a second example. Let's go to the Mixolydian mode. We'll stay with the key of A, but now we'll talk A Mixolydian. Now, A Mixolydian is derived from the D major scale. And again, if you're not totally sure about that, that's all covered pretty heavily in the lessons on music theory and the lessons on the modes on my website. The chord scale of D major would be D major 7, E minor 7, F sharp minor 7, G major 7, A7, B minor 7, C sharp minor 7 flat 5, and then back to D major. That's the chord scale in the key of D major. And if we know that A Mixolydian is derived from D major, then we know that chord scale is going to apply to A Mixolydian as well. Now here I can use that same exact trick that I used in the Dorian mode. I can go down a whole step from home, so I'd go to G and play a major 7 arpeggio. This is all in the mode of A Mixolydian. I can play G major 7, or I can go up to B minor 7 before returning back home to A Mixolydian. So I'm going to use a backing track based on Eric Clapton's Let It Rain, which calls for the A Mixolydian mode, and I'll show you what I mean again. So here I am in A Mixolydian. I can play G major 7, but return back to A. Or I can go up to B minor and play B minor 7 and return back to A again. So generally speaking, that's a really easy trick to remember, and this actually works in both the Dorian and Mixolydian modes. If you go a step down from home and play a major 7 arpeggio, or go a step up from home and play a minor 7 arpeggio, that's going to work as sort of a tension building device before you return back to your home chord. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can spin out this idea. Any of those chords from the chord scale in whatever mode you're playing in are going to be fair game in this kind of context. And you don't even have to stick to that chord scale. You can superimpose other chords on top of your home chord too and get some interesting ideas. So that's something that you should really play around with and experiment with, because there's a whole world of sounds to get out of that.